The clock is ticking for the Buccaneers to get a long-term deal done with Mike Evans. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this live edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com, your credentialed media member covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And we are here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And as always, we want to share our appreciation for your continued support of the show. This episode of Locked On Bucs is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Who do I think the Bucs will name as team captains this season? That's coming up a little bit later. First, we got to address the news that came out Friday morning, and that, of course, is that Mike Evans' agent, Deryk Gilmore, issued a press release basically saying that the clock to get an extension is ticking. So the Bucs have until Saturday, September 9th, one day before the season officially starts, to get a long-term deal with Evans done before talks are ceased for the duration of the season. The press release said, when Mike Evans was drafted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers organization, his promises were to win a Super Bowl and be a Buc for life. He knew he would do everything in his power to make both come true. For the past 9 years, Mike has set records on the field and will surely put him in the Hall of Fame. He's considered one of the most selfless teammates by his peers and coaching staff and has been one of the most charitable players in the National Football League. He loves Tampa and the community surrounding the Bucs, and after keeping his promise of winning a Super Bowl, he hopes to uphold his promise to be a Buc for life. As he enters year 10, he is facing the prospect of doing so with uncertainty surrounding his future. Despite our efforts over the past 2 years and professionalism of Bucs general manager Jason Licht and assistant general manager Mike Greenberg, we have not received an offer to stay in Tampa. This is disappointing to Mike as he sees other teams step up to keep key pieces and players that are important to their organizations. Many players with his status would have held out of camp to not risk injury, but Mike has continued practicing hard as always because he puts his team first. When you have a player that will be a Hall of Famer and still has 4 to 6 more years to make an impact in the league, you move heaven and earth to keep him on your team, and we would hope ownership feels the same way. We have been working on extending Mike's career with the Bucs for over a year, and we want the fans to know this is not a tactic and the ball is in the owner's court. That said, we are giving the Bucs until the start of the regular season to make him a Buc for life, and if that cannot happen, 100% of Mike's focus will be on football and his future and where he can continue to make an impact. Mike wants the next phase of his career to be with an organization who wants him and wants to help him win a Super Bowl, which is why we have informed the Buccaneers organization that we will discontinue contract discussions as of September 9th, 2023. There is a lot to unpack in that statement. And the first thing that I'm going to say is take it seriously. You have to take this seriously because if you pawn it off as just a tactic or just leverage or whatever you want to call it, you are going to discount Mike's desire to get a deal done and stay in Tampa. At the same time, you are going to discount your chances of being able to retain Mike Evans. And as Mike Garafolo pointed out on Good Morning Football, this September 9th deadline may mean that they're cutting off talks for good after that. Maybe not, but it is possible. You go back to what he said, that, we have informed the Buccaneers that we will discontinue contract discussions as of September 9th, 2023. Now, most certainly, to me, this is a tactic. It 100% is. I don't care that Deryk Gilmore said in the statement that he's informing the fans that this is not a tactic. It 100% is. But it's a tactic that puts Mike Evans and Deryk Gilmore in the driver's seat of these negotiations, putting it out to the court of public opinion, putting it out to a fan base that adores and beloves Mike Evans, virtually unlike any Buccaneer we've seen before. Maybe you have Derek Brooks up there. Maybe you have Rondé Barber up there. Maybe you have Leroy Selman up there. But Mike Evans has been the most beloved Buccaneer for the better part of 2 decades in terms of who we've seen come and go from this organization. So you want to do everything you can to put the heat and put the pressure on Jason Light and Mike Greenberg and the Bucs as a franchise to get this deal done before this self-imposed deadline that Mike Evans' agent has put out there. Now, an unnecessary contract dispute heading into the season is going to be hanging over his head and could prove to be bad for either side. If Mike Evans goes out there and doesn't put up another 1,000-yard season, doesn't keep that streak going, that's going to hurt the negotiations. If he does go out there and put up the 1,000 yards that everybody's expecting, that's going to hurt the Bucs side of the negotiations. And they can point out, look, there were 20-some players that had 1,000 yards last season. Mike was barely in the top 20 in touchdown receptions. Yeah, they're going to use that as a tactic because all these negotiations are slinging mud at one another to try to get the best deal possible for either side. So both sides are going to disparage the other to try to either get more money or spend less money, however you want to look at it. But one thing that I do want to focus on real quick is I know I just mentioned this whole thing is a tactic to put the Mike Evans and Deryk Gilmore in the driver's seat in these negotiations with Jason Light and Mike Greenberg. But Gilmore went out of his way to compliment Jason Light and Mike Greenberg in this statement. And the line, the ball is in, or let me find the exact line real quick, just because I don't want to botch it. We hope ownership feels the same way. That is a line from this statement. And you take a look back, where you see them say, the professionalism of general manager Jason Light and assistant general manager Mike Greenberg, we have not received an offer to stay in Tampa. And Mike sees other organizations doing that for their players, but they solely point out the ownership. So is this a Glazer problem? Is this an issue where the Glazers don't want to pony up the dough that it's going to cost to keep Mike Evans? Because we've heard in the past the Glazers have given Jason Light, a blank check, sign whoever you need to, spend however much you need to, get these guys in there. Are the Glazers reining it back now? They got their Super Bowl with Tom Brady a couple of years ago. They spent all that money on Ndamukong Suh and Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski and Leonard Fournette, and they brought in all these guys for these championship runs. Are they pulling back now, saying, look, we spent the money, we're still paying for that Super Bowl, now it's time to rein it in a little bit? And does Jason Light no longer have carte blanche to spend however much he wants on whoever he wants? You would think there would be some exceptions for a guy like Mike Evans, but we're going to have to wait and see. Real quick before we hit the break, I do want to hit the live chat here. Demon Hunter in the chat, most underrated receiver in NFL history. Absolutely. I saw people responding to Adam Schefter's report about this on Twitter, talking about how he's overrated. tell me you're a casual without telling me you're a casual. And saying Mike Evans is overrated certainly puts you in that category. Booger Dog. Let me guess. Bucks can't pay Evans because his numbers this year and next few aren't going to produce because quarterback performance expectations stink. Yeah, sounds plausible. It doesn't matter who the quarterback's been. Mike Evans has given you 1,000 yards each and every season. It didn't matter if it was Tom Brady or Jameis Winston or Josh McCown or Mike Glennon or Ryan Fitzpatrick. Mike Evans produces, and he's going to produce with Baker Mayfield in this Dave Canales offense. Another quick one before we hit to the break. I can see the Glazers letting him walk. I hope not, though. You know, I've blocked and muted a lot of people on Twitter that are on the soccer side of all of this with the hashtags Glazers out and all that nonsense and getting tagged in these ridiculous threads. And I'm like, I really don't care. You're going to see Bucs fans jump on that bandwagon sooner than later if it comes out that the Glazers are the ones preventing Mike Evans from getting a long-term deal. But, we have plenty more to discuss about this Mike Evans situation, including the other side of this argument. That is coming up next here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you're going to have. As I've mentioned, I got some club-level seats for my son and I to go see the Tampa Bay Lightning take on the Columbus Blue Jackets in Columbus in November, thanks to Game Time. And these tickets were easily one of the best deals that I've ever gotten on any tickets ever. Concerts, sporting events, anything at all. These were far and away the best deal. And I have Game Day to thank for it because Game Day is the place for last minute ticket deals. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. And a special thank you to all of our everydayers out there who are tuning in. Don't forget, David and I will be back on Monday with the start of our regular season coverage, starting with Buccaneers Vikings week. That's right. This is the last Friday live before the first Friday live of the 2023 regular season. Don't forget, live episodes Friday nights on YouTube, 7:30. Make sure you're subscribed, turn on those alerts so that you can join all the fun in the live chat. So, yes, everybody wants Mike Evans back. The Bucs want Mike Evans back. Jason Light, Todd Bowles, all the players in the locker room, they all want Mike Evans back. The fans, all of you in the live chat, all of you listening at home, all of you watching on delay on YouTube, you all want Mike Evans back. Evans himself wants to be back in Tampa. But what if the Buccaneers don't cave to Gilmore's demands? What if there is no deal done in the next 8 days, that September 9th deadline right before the start of the regular season? What if there's nothing done? Is Deryk Gilmore, Mike Evans' agent, really going to cut off talks entirely if a deal isn't done? Because when I was talking to David about this earlier, he said that he wasn't buying that negotiations were done completely. He still feels that after the season, they'll go back to the drawing board. They'll go back to talking if a deal isn't struck. I don't know. He seemed to me to be somewhat threatening in this, that, They're done talking. I'll read it one more time real quick. We will discontinue contract discussions as of September 9th, 2023. Not we will suspend talks, not we will pause talks. We will discontinue. I don't know about you, but when something's discontinued, usually doesn't come back. So that's one big thing to take away from this. But you also take a look at the fact that Gilmore and by default, Mike Evans is using the media and the press release as a negotiating ploy to apply pressure. I touched on it towards the end of the first segment. They're trying to get the ire, the frustration, and the anger from the Buccaneers fan base to flood the Buccaneers with social media posts and comments and, things like that to apply the pressure to get this done. It's to David, and then after he mentioned it to me as well, I don't think it's a coincidence that this is released right before the Buccaneers are off for the weekend. It's a holiday weekend. It's Labor Day. There's no practice coming up. So now they drop this on a Friday, and this just gets to stew and marinate all weekend long, where the fans are going to be speculating. People are going to be talking about it. People are going to be writing about it. And all it will do is show the Buccaneers, show Jason Licht that everyone's on Mike Evans' side, and they better get this deal done, and they better cave, and they better pay him that money. But it also seems, to me, slightly out of character for Mike Evans to do this. And it's not like Evans' agent went rogue and just did this on his own. He's doing this with the okay from Mike Evans. And we've talked constantly about how Evans is a team first guy, and he always does these restructures. And yeah, I mean, these restructures really aren't a big deal to the players. All it does is give them the money that they're already owed sooner. That's it. So it's not like he's taking less money. He's been creating less of a salary cap. But you have the Mike Evans Family Foundation. You have how much he loves being in Tampa. You have all of his work in the community and with the fans. And he's genuinely one of the nicest people you're ever going to come around. So this does come as a little bit of a surprise. At the same time, he's seeing guys like Cooper Kupp, or I can't think of another one off the top of my head right now. Odell Beckham Jr. a couple of times go out there and get more money than what he's gotten on the open market. And they're not as good as he is. They're not as reliable. They're not as consistent. They're flat out not as good as Mike Evans. So at some point, the human side of this is going to play into it. The emotions are going to play into this. That's going to spark a press release like this to say, look, get this done or I'm leaving. And it's not like I'm going to be lacking in options if I become a free agent. If Mike Evans hits the open negotiating window, there is zero doubt in my mind he ends up being the highest paid wide receiver in free agency. I don't even know what other wide receivers are going to be free agents. It doesn't matter. Mike Evans will get the most money out of any free agent wide receiver, because you have teams like Cincinnati, like Buffalo, like the Chargers, like the Dallas Cowboys, like, you can continue to the Baltimore Ravens. You have all these teams that look at Mike Evans and say, we are this close to a Super Bowl. Why wouldn't we want that guy who's done it, who's climbed that mountain, who's won that ring in our locker room and helping our quarterback and helping our offense? It will happen. So there is a sense of urgency, though I don't know if you can really take the other emotional side out unless Mike Evans feels really, really jaded and jilted. I don't know that you can take the other side out where he does love this organization. He does love this community. He does love these fans. So you have all of that factored in, not to mention, and I got to run through this relatively quickly because we're up against another break, but the financial side. According to SpotTrack, the Buccaneers have around $19 million in cap space for next season. Chris Godwin is going to be in a contract year in 2024. He's got 2 years left on his deal. You have Devin White, Antoine Winfield Jr., Greg Gaines, Matt Filer, Baker Mayfield, all free agents. Maybe Baker balls out, and now they have to give him a bag because they need to keep him as their quarterback. If he stinks, maybe they look at other options. Either way, the quarterback position is going to have to be addressed via free agency or the draft. You have Tristan Wirfs, who's going to be due a mega extension coming up shortly. So, yeah, Evans deserves something in the realm of what Cooper Kupp got, which was 3 years, $75 million. But can the Buccaneers at that point afford to pay 2 wide receivers $20+ million a year and still have questions at quarterback, still have other vital players and vital positions that need to be addressed? And if you sign Evans to that extension, does that mean that Godwin is going to be the one that hits free agency when his contract is up after the 2024 season? There are a lot of factors that play into all of this, and you have to sit back and put yourself in Jason Light's shoes and say, who are we willing to lose to keep Mike Evans? Are we willing to lose Chris Godwin? Are we willing to lose Devin White or Antoine Winfield Jr. or Tristan Wirfs? Because you can't pay everybody. That's the curse of having a good football team, of having just won a Super Bowl. You can't keep everybody. So now you have to play that balancing act where you have a receiver on the wrong side of 30 years old while you're trying to retool and revamp this team instead of going full-blown rebuild. Can you afford to pay him that $20+ million and lose somebody else that's younger and at another position of need? I'm not advocating for Mike Evans to not come back. Don't hear what I'm not saying. What I am saying is this is more than just, oh, it's Mike Evans, give him what he wants. There are a ton of factors that go into this, and you and I both know that Jason Light is going to do any and everything in his power to make sure that Mike Evans comes back. Let's hit the chat real fast before we hit the break. We got Sal319, Carlton, Shaq, and Devin. Yeah, I mean, all of them are going to need contracts against soon, but I'm not sure if you're saying you're willing to lose those guys for Evans or those are other guys that need to be paid. Less in the chat, if no deal, who would replace Evans? Trey Palmer? You worry about that next offseason. You still have a year of Mike Evans left. So Godwin would become your number one. Maybe you're addressing it in the draft. Maybe you're signing one of the less expensive free agents. Maybe Trey Palmer does step up and becomes that dude. You know, he's shown flashes, but that's going to be a lot of pressure, and it's going to hurt the viability of whatever quarterback you have. Demon Hunter in the chat, you can't replace Mike Evans. No, 100% you can't. But sometimes, as Mike Evans even said himself when he was speaking to Jeremy Fowler of ESPN, it's a business. He wants to stay here, but it's a business, and it's a business for both sides on this dispute. So with that, we are going to jump into another one. But who are the Bucs going to name as captains in 2023? Start dropping your predictions in the chat right now. I'm going to give you mine coming up next here on Locked On Bucs. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use. You can bet on everything from spreads to player props, over-unders, and much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you don't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Wrapping things up here on a Friday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. James Yarcho, deputy editor of BucsNation.com. Let's talk about captains. The Indianapolis Colts already announced their captains, and I figured, you know what? This is a good time for us to jump in and talk about this a little bit, because last year the Buccaneers had 5 captains, and they were Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Lavonte David, Devin White, and Vita Vea. I'm guessing probably early next week, maybe even over the weekend, the Bucs are going to announce their captains for this year. And I have more than 5 that I think are going to get that C patch on their jersey. Real quick, I do want to jump in the chat. Let's see what some of you are predicting for the captains. Daytona Dad says Evans, Wirfs, Lavonte, and Winfield. And then he throws in Vea as another possibility. I think David is in the chat under Locked On Bucs. He says Baker Mayfield, others. Clarification from Sal 319. He says we lose Carlton, Shaq, and Devin. I don't know. I do think they end up losing Shaq. I don't know about the other 2. Devin White is still kind of up in the air. I don't know what to make of Devin White. But I'll tell you what the Buccaneers are going to make of Devin White. They're going to make him a captain. So I have 6 that I have named right now, but I'm going to give you a bonus one here in just a second. On the defensive side of the ball, I think it's the exact same as last year. It's Devin White, it's Lavonte David, it's Vita Vea. Boom, boom, boom. I do think Antoine Winfield Jr. deserves to have the C on his chest. I just don't think it happens. I think it ends up being exactly the same as last year. On the offensive side of the ball, I think it is Baker Mayfield. Typically, the quarterback ends up being voted the captain. He's a leader on the team. He's going to end up getting the C. And then Mike Evans and Tristan Wirfs, I think, gets the C on his chest. He's talked a lot this offseason about how he wants to step up and fill some of that leadership void that was left when some of the, Tom Brady and others departed after last season. And no Ryan Jensen out there on the field. Tristan Wirfs is the leader of that offensive line. I think that's going to spill over into the other aspects of the game. I think Tristan Wirfs deserves a captain's patch on his chest. But typically, NFL teams are allowed to have up to 6 captains, but the rule isn't really enforced. So you do end up having extra players be captains. Some of them are captains on special teams. Maybe they're on the defense or the offense and the special teams. But I do have a bonus special teams captain if there is one. And I'm going with the second-year guy, Jake Camarda. I don't think they end up giving it to Zach Triner or Chase McLaughlin. I do think Jake Camarda finished as one of the best punters in the NFL last year. They are going to look to him to take on a little bit of a leadership role amongst that group. You might see a Cam Gill or, I'm not really sure, maybe a Devin Tompkins be named as a special teams captain. Typically, it's either the kicker or the punter, but that's my bonus captain there. Daytona Dad, I appreciate you, buddy. He says James Yarcho is the Mike Evans of podcasts. I appreciate that a lot. So anybody else? Let's see. We got Sal in the chat again. Captains Evans, Wirfs, David, and Winfield. I like those picks. And Bill Byers in the chat. Do the Bucs have more captains than wins this season? He does say just kidding, but no. Also no. And if you want to see me defend the Buccaneers in quite a few different situations with Aaron Freeman, Julian Council, and Ross Jackson of Locked On Falcons, Locked On Panthers, Locked On Saints, you can catch the NFL season preview series that we did here with the Locked On Podcast Network. Some of the feeds are right here on YouTube. You can check the Locked On NFL channel to watch them on YouTube. Listen to them on your podcast catcher of choice. But when they asked who was finishing in last place in the NFC South, all 3 of them in stereo said the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Nah. They all saw what the same thing David and I have talked about quite a bit was Tom Brady left, the team must stink. They didn't take into account all the things that David and I have covered over the offseason and why we've said that this team is going to surprise some people and they're going to be a lot better than what some project being in contention for the number 1 pick. So with that, I will bid you all a very fair adieu. Thank you all that jumped into the live chat and were watching the show. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you have any reactions, thoughts, comments, topics, ideas, or you're just excited about the NFL season getting ready to start, you can drop questions, comments, etc. in the YouTube comments or email us at lockedonbuckspodcast@gmail.com. Check out everything that I'm doing over at bucksnation.com. Check out David's work over at bucksgameday.com. And of course, follow everything on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucks, and at DHarrison82. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.